We have already seen one level of security as far as MariaDB is concerned, and that is that we can only log on as the database root user locally on the system because it's requiring the Unix socket. However, the database server itself by default has an extra level of security that it is only listening on the loopback interface by default. We go through and take a look at the listening TCP ports, and we're mainly interested in port 3306. We'll see it's listening on 127.0.0.1, which again is secure, but not necessarily usable if we need people to connect from other systems. The configuration files that we use can be gained by looking at the MySQL daemon itself. We can run this as a standard user. We can run the option -- help that gives us limited help. We get more help using -- verbose, but it is pages of information we're going to get. We only need to look at the first 9 lines, I think it is, but if we use head, we'll actually display the top 10 lines, and we'll see the configuration files in order that they are searched. If we look at the etc mysql my.cm, it just includes other files. And that includes the 50-server.cmf inside of the mariadb.conf.d directory. If we look for the bind address and comment this out, and add in an additional line that skips the bind address, we'll be listening on all interfaces. So comment out the one line that starts with bind address and add in another line, skip bind-address. With that done, save your changes and restart the MariaDB server. Now with that done, we should be able to go through and list our ports, and we should see that we're listening then on all interfaces. Now, of course, the best way to get this done is to go through and do it ourselves. So let's work on our MariaDB configuration, understand a little bit about that configuration by reviewing the help, configuring then the skip bind address, and review the status and listening ports once we've restarted our service. And look at this, the glorious command line of Ubuntu 2, where we've already installed our MariaDB database server. When we list our TCP and listening ports, we can see that we are listening on the database port 3306, but it's only on our local address 127.0.0.1. So whilst this is secure, it doesn't really open up our system as a network database server. We don't want to weaken our security and allow the database root account in, but we've already secured that by using our plugin for Unix socket authentication. When we look at our configuration files, we can interrogate the MySQL daemon by looking at -- help. But we'll say this is good because it shows us things like the version of the MariaDB server that we are using, but it doesn't give me much else. But if I include the option -- verbose, which they hint me at adding, we get then, well, probably too much information. Now, I can page through this. However, I could also go through and just look at the top 10 lines. If I use then pipe and head without any arguments, we'll display the top 10 lines. It's about line 9 that I want to look at, and we can see the configuration files in the correct order. Now, we don't have an etc my.cmf by default, but we do have the etc mysql my.cnf. So if we go through and take a look at that file, and I can cheat a little bit by cutting and pasting the information down, so we can go through and paste that down. We can see the contents of the file, but it might be clearer if I clear the screen and up arrow and run the command again. There's not really anything in this. However, we are including the etc mysql conf.d and the etc mysql mariadb.conf.d. We're going to be concentrating on the MariaDB directory. If I go through and take a look inside of the MySQL and mariadb.conf.d and 50-server.cnf, this then is the server's configuration rather than the client configuration. we're going to be able to see by catting it out, there is probably, again, a little bit too much with all the comments to be able to see. However, if I clear my screen and then start off my commands again, I'm going to be able to run through and edit this file. So I'm going to elevate my privileges using sudo. And obviously we can use any editor that we want. I'm going to be using Vim, but if you want to use Nano, escape and dot brings up the last argument, which is our file. And then move down, making sure that we are under the block header for MySQLD. And we can see the bind address. And this is what is linking it only to our 127 address. So let's comment this out and add in a new line, ensuring the new line is not commented, and put skipped -bind -address. That's all we need. So we can save our change. Now, having changed our configuration, we should be good to go. And we can go through and use sudo and systemctl and restart the database server. So systemctl, restart, and then MariaDB. Now that we've restarted it, if we go through and take a look at our listening ports now, you can see straight away we've got 3306 listed, and it's listed on all interfaces as 0.0.0.0. Now we can also check the status of our server. It's not the previous command. It's a couple of lines previously, but it'd be easy to get back with the arrow key. But if we look at another way of searching our history, we can use exclamation mark to reverse search our history. But normally when we put the exclamation mark, we're looking for lines beginning with. Well, because most of my administrative commands are going to begin with sudo, that isn't going to be useful. But I can use exclamation mark and then a question mark. Question mark is really a wildcard in here, where we're specifying then we can have any amount of characters before systemctl. And we don't care what comes after it, so we put, again, a question mark. So the last command that contains systemctl, and then we put colon and S for substitute, and substitute restart with status. Now we can see then it expands to sudo systemctl status and MariaDB, but we can look at another way that we can access our history to give us a relatively easy way of replacing commands that we have already run. Now we can see then that it all looks good. The yellow marks are just telling us the command that it's found. So we're good to go and we're up and running. And I can just use Q to quit out of this. And then we're ready to move back to our slides so we can look at developing our database just a little bit further.